There was a man called Moses. To understand this story, we must go back in history.
You shall never feast on my creation.
Whose special guest at his funeral was Satan himself. For so many years, many historians have pondered on this topic. For so many years, nations have wondered what really happened. Books have been written, predictions have been made. But what really is the truth about the body of this man? I'm talking about a man whose funeral was attended by angels, whose special guest at his funeral was Satan himself. This has never happened before throughout history, and this is the first time such a thing ever happened. What happened here? Why are there no humans? And so, to understand this story, we must go back in history. There was a man called Moses, and Moses was born in Egypt, but he is born of an Israelite, and he came from the tribe called Levi. And when he was born, there was the fulfillment of the prophecy of the enslavement of Israel in Egypt, and they had served their time in Egypt. They were introduced to Egypt by Joseph, who became the prime minister after professing an economic solution to Pharaoh and the whole of Egypt. This was a man who preserved food for 7 years without being in this generation of technology. How did he do it? That is a story for another day. Now, so Moses is born in Egypt, but is born of an Israelite, and he comes from the family of Levi. He has two siblings. One is Aaron and the other is called Miriam. Now the story gets really interesting because when this baby is born, for some reasons, the celestial readers, those are called the necromancers, the stargazers, the witches and the wizards who dwelled in Egypt, were able to predict that something unique has been born. And so a law was quickly passed that every firstborn son that was born within the time frame of few months should be killed. And every time a Hebrew woman wants to deliver a child, let the child be killed, especially if it is a boy. And for some reasons, when Moses is born, his mother discovers that he is a special child. All this is found in the account of Exodus chapter 1 right down to chapter 2. And so she finds him to be a special child. And the crazy part is that other women were able to hand over their kids to the authorities to be killed, but they partnered with the mother of Moses and did not let anyone kill the boy Moses. Now 3 months passed and it was impossible to hold the baby. You know, to have a child who is 3 months old, all the crying, all the inconvenience, sooner or later this baby will most likely be caught. And so the wisdom of the mother of Moses was to put him in a basket and go to the place where the daughter of Pharaoh bathes every day. The mother of Moses sends the boy with his elder sister called Miriam, and the guy is put in a basket and put in the water. And of course they had put preservatives in the basket to ensure that no animal would kill the boy. Something very strange happens. Now this is a river and this is a baby. I would assume that the child will begin to cry, but no, Moses stayed quiet from the hands of his sister, and when he got to the place around where the daughter of Pharaoh was taking her bath, the baby begins to cry. Listen, cry only where help will come. And coincidentally, Pharaoh's daughter saw the boy and picked interest in this baby. Of course, your father has passed a law that every Israelite who is born at this time should be killed, but for some reason this baby was preserved. Little did they know that they just adopted the terror of Egypt. Quickly, they pick up the boy from the water, and she calls his name Moses, which means to draw out of the water. They had no idea that this is a mystery in a baby. And so, fast forward to many years later, Moses is being put in training to become the next Pharaoh. But for some reason, he discovers that the people of Israel are being maltreated by the Egyptians, and Moses begins to retaliate. And then one day he finds an Israelite being molested by an Egyptian, and he beats the Egyptian and kills him and buries the guy under the sand. The next day he sees two Israelites fighting, and he comes to separate the fight, and they said, "Hey, who made you judge over us? Have you come to kill us as you killed the Egyptian?" And when he discovered that this thing was found, he fled for his life. And this is where the journey of Moses began. Now, I'll spare you all the details about the man Moses, because my emphasis is how he died. Fast forward to so many years later, he finds a wife, he finds a family, and begins to do the work of God. In Exodus chapter 3, Moses encounters God in the place called the burning bush, where the bush was on fire, but the bush wasn't consumed. And God calls him supernaturally to take Israel out of slavery. How do you go back to the same nation where you are wanted for murder? Moses tells the Lord to show him signs, of which God does. God shows the sign of leprosy, puts his hand in the pocket and brings the hand out, and the hand becomes as white as snow. He puts the hand back inside the pocket and brings it out, and the hand becomes normal. He takes his stick and throws on the ground, and the stick becomes a snake. He picks up the stick and it becomes normal. With that, he told God, "We can have a deal now," because he understood you don't fight Pharaoh with empty words, you fight Pharaoh with power. So Moses goes to Pharaoh's palace and then begins to challenge him. In all the 10 plagues of Egypt happen, which I will share some other time. Moses begins to follow God, and Egypt releases the Israelites, and so many tremendous signs happen. Here's where the story even gets more crazy. Moses begins to follow up God's people. He provides for them, he prays for them, he intercedes for them, but something very strange happened. One day, Israel got Moses on his nerves because they were full of complaints. It didn't matter how many signs they saw, it didn't matter how many miracles they saw, they kept on complaining every day. And so Moses, being fed up, God told him to speak to the rock, and he struck the rock, not understanding that this rock wasn't just a rock. This rock was an eschatological mystery. It was a messianic mystery. It was a mystery of Christ to come, because the Old Testament is simply a shadow of the things to come. Moses had no idea that this rock wasn't just a rock. This rock literally was Jesus, but he was in the unrevealed format. And so Moses strikes the rock, and God gets angry at Moses and says, "It doesn't matter how much you've done for me, you have ended your assignment here because you struck the rock when I told you to speak to the rock." His journey of faith, his journey of miracles, his journey of leading over 3 million people came to an end. And so God told him to go to a mountain where he would die, and God shows him the side of the promised land, and he sees the land, but is prohibited from getting access to this land just because of the mistakes that he made. Understand that Moses is iconic, and I'm going to do a video just about the man Moses, but my emphasis today is about the funeral of this man. Moses is iconic, and the people of Israel, they knew the Moses of God but did not know the God of Moses. When Moses dies, he dies in the mountain all by himself, and we can find the records of this in Deuteronomy chapter 34 verse 5. It says, "So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in a valley." Notice, God himself buries Moses over Beth-peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. This is a man who was buried by God. But the question becomes, why would God bury a man? I have 3 reasons that I could spell out for you. Number 1, in Exodus 3, God calls Moses as a man. But in Exodus 7 verse 1, he says, "See, I have made you a God to Pharaoh." You understand that the demonic realm always waits for God to do something that they may copy. There are certain mysteries of God that Satan had no idea about until these mysteries were done by God. And when God worked these mysteries, the enemy went to these mysteries and learned the formula on how these mysteries were made. And then he had to create a copy of that, because you cannot create a copy until you understand the manufacturing process of the original. So when Moses dies, notice that Israel is unaware that Moses, their leader, is dead. This means that he could come back and nobody would know that he actually died, because some days he would go to the mountain and spend 40 days, sometimes 80 days, just to come up with the laws of God. And so when Moses dies, something very strange happens. Jude, by intimacy with God, was able to zoom into the spiritual realm and see what happened at the funeral of Moses. Let's see. In Jude chapter 1 verse 9, a very short book of the Bible, but very deep, it says, "Yet Michael, the archangel, while contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses." So while we hear that God buried Moses, there was something that happened at that funeral that nobody told you about. There was a war at that funeral, because at the funeral of Moses, Satan came, God came, and angel Michael came. So why did Satan come? Number one, because every time you have sin, or every time you have a point of accusation, enemy has legal grounds over your life. And so the only way for you not to be legally given to the enemy is to live a life free from sin. So the enemy began to contend for the body of Moses. It has never been found throughout history that the enemy would want the body of a man. So why was he so interested in this particular body? Number one, I realized Moses led 3 million plus people. If the enemy had access to his body, he would be able to raise Moses from the dead, possess the body of Moses, and goes back to Israel and mislead the people. He would reroute the constitutions. He would change the laws and change the ordinances. So what I assume the enemy wanted to do with the body of Moses was not to bury the body. No, he wanted to possess the body and bring him back to life so that he could continue leading Israel as though it is still Moses. There are people who are dead, but they are alive because the enemy took hold of their bodies and continued to live his will through those bodies. This is a demonic mystery. It's a mystery in occultism, which I will talk about some other time. And why did God bury Moses and made no one to know where this man was buried? Because Moses graduated from a man and transcended to becoming a god. It means that he became something so special that everybody would want to study him. There's something called autopsy. I believe the enemy would have taken the body of Moses. If he would not possess the body, he would run a spiritual autopsy on the body of Moses to find how God and the system that God used to kill a god like Moses. And when the enemy discovers how God kills a god, the enemy now will be equipped enough to know how to kill other gods that he will find on the earth. The enemy is a student of God. He loves to study God's strengths and patterns so as to destroy and so as to replicate. So on this particular day, standing side by side was the host of light and the host of darkness. Nothing like this had been seen in history before. But of course, Michael prevailed because he rebuked the devil in the name of the Lord. And that's how the enemy left, and Moses was buried in a place that till date no scientist, nobody, no researcher, no geologist has been able to decipher and determine where Moses was buried. But in Matthew 17 we find out on a certain mount, when Jesus ascended the mountain, Moses appears, Elijah appears, which means that though he was buried, he's still very much alive. But this is the story of the funeral that was attended by spirits, and this is the story of why the body of Moses was contended for. If you are blessed by this video and if you learn from this video, please make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can get more videos. These videos takes us many months to prepare and many hours to edit. Please be part of this family and help me share. God bless you.